Okay, the webinar today, the title is Tracking and Auto Alerts on Higher Risk Vendors and Those with a Debt Subject to Offset. And we'll get into what I mean by higher risk vendor. We on the Fed Data Check team use two definitions of higher risk vendors. One is those on the SAM exclusion list, and we'll go through what that is. And we also use a definition involving vendors who have been terminated for cause or terminated for default multiple times. So two different definitions. Vendors with a debt subject to offset used to be called vendors with a delinquent federal debt. We'll get into what that means and the implications of using a P card for payment on those awards. And this concept of closing the barn door before or after. So quickly, one example here, it has happened, if your department or if your department makes an award to a vendor who is excluded, proceedings completed, and they're on the debarred list, we track that. We'll send our POC an email. You'll hear about it. But that would be after the horses have left the barn, right? The award has been made. We and the Fed Data Check team then flag it, and then we notify you of something that was already done. The purpose of this webinar is to show how we're moving towards generating alerts and information before any of that happens. So give you the tools and an easy access so that you're on guard before you work with vendors who are on the exclusion list or have a debt subject to offset. So that's just a quick preview. A lot more to come. I said I was going to skip through this to the end. One thing, the topic today is really on monitoring higher risk vendors and those with a debt subject to offset. One of the things we put a lot of effort into recently is more accurate tracking and reporting of 8A procedure dollars. So if you're interested in that, we could take that after this webinar. Take your questions. Point being, we do more than just data quality and some of these other things. Okay, let's get into the meat of the webinar then. The data check, we use two different definitions of a higher risk vendor. One is a vendor in the exclusions area within the performance information functional area SAM, formerly the excluded parties list system. And if you're in that area, and we only deal with firms. There are people who you can be excluded as an individual, as a vessel, which is something I didn't know, a ship, or there's also a miscellaneous category. With Fed Data Check, we deal with contracts which are tied to firms. I guess they could be tied to individuals too, but we only deal with exclusions that are in the tied to firms, not individual people, for example. Okay, let's take a look at what these four different categories mean quickly. We'll go out to this website. Okay. Maybe I can find that. Because as many, well, let's just go through it. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this already. Here we go here. Exclusion type. So Here we go. Here, if I'm spinning too fast too, if you're not able to keep up with how quickly I'm moving the browser, let me know, because that can be a problem. Okay, four exclusion types. If you're a firm and you're on the exclusions list, you can fall into one or more of these categories. One or more. Okay, preliminary ineligible proceedings pending. And it gives a definition here. Preliminarily ineligible based upon adequate evidence of conduct indicating a lack of business honesty or integrity, or lack of business integrity or regulation, statute, executive order, or other legal authority. You know, you've done something pretty bad. I don't know how else to put it. And there's evidence to indicate that while it's preliminary, there's adequate evidence indicating that. And one of the points here that when you read through this is that from a functional standpoint, if you're the vendor and you're in the preliminarily ineligible, or you're in the ineligible proceedings completed, it doesn't matter. The effect is the same. Agencies shall not solicit offers from, award contracts to renew, place new orders with, or otherwise extend the duration of current contracts, or consent to subcontracts in excess of $30,000. You know, they have the exception of the agency head, but whether it's completed or pending, I've also heard it referred to as the death sentence. I mean, you don't get new contracts, you don't get current ones extended, you don't get current ones money added to them. And I know with, for example, NOAA, if we have anybody here from NOAA, the general rule of thumb is they terminate you immediately. They don't wait for the current contracts to end, although that's not a requirement. Okay, there are two other categories, and these come up. Prohibition restriction may be subject to sanctions pursuant to the conditions imposed by the Treasury, Office of Foreign Assets Control, or subject to a sanction, restriction, or partial denial pursuant to the conditions imposed by the Department of State or federal agency of the U.S. government. Where we see this most often is or an area that's common in this category. Call it an exclusion type. One of the four exclusion types is a violation of the Clean Air or Clean Water Act by the EPA. So actually, let's take a look at one of those. See if we can. So I'm going to go to Sam. I'm going to put in the DUNS number, and I'm going to hit search. And if they're on the exclusion list, you get these purple boxes. That signals that the vendor is has some type of exclusion associated with them. Hit view details. Okay, so right here. So this vendor, Hydrovac Services, Inc., is on an indefinitely on the exclusions list. And the reason is they are convicted of a Clean Air or Clean Water Act violation. And they're ineligible for awards to be formed at this facility only. So this, and there's the violating facility. Duke Energy, I know, is another one. They have, I think it was a clean water in some plant in North Carolina, and they're very common in terms of having awards with the government. So it's okay to award to Duke Energy. It's okay to award to Hydrovac, but the prohibition restriction exclusion type may pick out certain facilities and say they're debarred. Any questions so far? So those first two, proceedings pending, proceedings completed, from a functional standpoint, it's a distinction without a difference. No awards. They're on the do not resuscitate list. With a prohibition restriction, you really have to come in and look at the additional comments, the notes, to understand what the prohibition involves. Okay, the fourth type of exclusion is a voluntary exclusion, and there's not that many of those. But again, it's similar to prohibition restriction in that to fully understand the implications, you have to go to SAM and you have to read the additional comments. Let's take a look at one of those. I can't ever recall actually I think I looked, I did look in the database, and there's only 6 of them that are associated with awards, civilian government awards since FY12. So it's very rare. Okay, Moorhead, Williams, and Associates. Voluntary exclusion is the type. Permanent injunction agreed by U.S. v. Williams. Okay. Yeah, it's often associated with a legal case, and I saw one where they said they are voluntarily excluding themselves from all government contracts per this court order. So they, the advantage to the government would be, presumably, if someone else knows, raise your hand. They don't. For the government, you don't have to go through all of the process and documentation and everything else involved in preliminary and eligible or proceedings completed. But the firm went through a court case, and as part of that outcome of that court, they voluntarily agreed to say, okay, we'll never do business with the government again. That's, at least I saw several of those examples, and this may be one of them here. Permanent injunction agreement. You can always contact the agency for additional information as well. Okay, so those are the 4 types. Sam, the other definition of a higher risk vendor, HRV, we'll use that acronym, that we use, are vendors who have been terminated for cause or terminated for default by 3 or more different departments since FY12. So you could be terminated for default 6 times by the same department, and you would not meet this definition. 3 times by 3 different departments, and you would. Let me see if I get a poll on that. Let's launch this. So is that a significant, how do you feel about that definition? If a vendor is terminated 3 times by 3 different departments, is that worse? You would think, as a general rule, than 3 times by the same department. I'm getting mostly yes here. My thinking was, if you're terminated 3 times by the same department, maybe it was all part of the same snafu. Saying maybe, you're a vendor, you were doing you had 3 awards for the Department of Labor doing survey statistics. You messed them all up, and they terminated you for, that would be for default in all 3 cases. Whereas if it's, you got terminated by 3 different departments. Wow. I mean, you got 3 different teams of contractors, 3 different project managers, 3 different efforts, and you got a systemic problem within your organization. That was my thinking. Right, I'm seeing yes. Most of you, not all of you have voted, but those who did, saying yes. Okay, so let's close that. Can you see my screen? People still see my screen? Raise your hand if you can see my screen. Okay, thank you. Now, one of the things I always thought was interesting, and I'd welcome some comment here, is what is the difference between termination for default and termination for cause? If you go to the FPDS&G data dictionary, and here I am at the reason for modification, you have the option of choosing terminate for default, complete or partial, and you also have the option of terminate for cause, 2 different codes. E, terminate for default, X, terminate for cause. So, FAR Part 2 defines termination for default as the exercise of the government's right to completely or partially terminate a contract because of the contractor's actual or anticipated failure to perform its contractual obligations. And then termination for cause, I got out of FAR 12403A. The clause at 52.2124 permits the government to terminate a contract for commercial items, either for the convenience of the government or for cause. So cause is when you're terminating a contract for commercial items. Default is for all other cases. Is that correct? I thought I'd heard that before, and when I did a little research, that's what I came up. Does anyone have a different view on that? And one of the interesting things, though, is that if you actually look in how it's done, so I'm looking at, if you look in FY18 for termination for default or termination for cause, it's not really holding up that way, because I got 10, or at least, 11, where they used termination for cause, and it was not for a commercial item. Let's go out and take a look at that. So the data, the actual data as to what COs and CSs do in FPDS&G in terms of picking the reason for mod default or the reason for mod cause, there doesn't seem to be a pattern. I got a question here from Darla, so give me 1 second and we're going to get to that. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Here, federal prison system, terminate for cause. Now, I said that was for a commercial item per FAR 12043A. And if we come down on this federal prison system, Bureau of Prisons, Department of Justice, inmate wash stations, kitchen equipment, appliances, this commercial item procedure is not used. I'm going to presume that was not a commercial item. Maybe they had to have something special for the inmates there that they had done this. So I would have thought that would have been termination for default. All right, if anyone has a comment on that, that'd be great. Okay. So what prevents a vendor who has an exclusion or has been debarred from creating a new name in or DUNS? One example I've run into is GTSI and Unicom. Both have DUNS number 107. Why don't I move this over here? Both have DUNS number 107-939-357. When you run the DUNS number and then filter the results to include inactive records, both vendor names come up. Yeah, that is a good question. Let's take a look. Okay, now one thing we do, I don't know the answer to that. Now, we do put effort into one of our reports that we'll look at. We look into a global parent DUNS number. So if you are if the global parent gets debarred, and then, like if, just hypothetically speaking, Berkshire Hathaway, which owns Geico, they own a railroad, they own a bunch of other businesses. If Berkshire got debarred, we would flag if any of the siblings got awarded. Similarly, we do sibling to sibling. If if the railroad, Burlington Northern, got debarred, then we would also flag awards to Geico. But does anyone know the answer to that question? So, we could look at that. Why don't we look at that one that was just raised? We go to Sam, search records, 107-939-357. I see. Right now, okay, now, they said that this came up in 2015. People come on and off the debarred list. They may have been on it one time, and then they came off it. I'm not seeing anything. Oh, inactive. Let me check inactive. Apply filters. Continue. Here we go. Right there. Okay, so if you apply the inactive records, then you could see. And what was that? Wait a minute. Okay, so yeah, Unicom is now the vendor, and they were GTSI Corporation. So if I can start. Let's see. A little bit of feedback there, Darla, but can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. So this is what you were referring to, I guess, which is GTSI gets debarred, and then they just, okay, that's gone. We'll just reform as Unicom government.
Right.
Kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
So then, but that would be a kind of a neat way to avoid debarment. You just shut down one corporation, get yourself a new DUNS number, form a different one.
Right, and this is a question I've had for quite some time, and nobody's been able to answer it for me.
Yeah. I can't either. Anyone raise their hand and have any experience with that? Who's on the? All right, let me. I'll make a note of that one, Darla. Maybe I can dig it up. Kind of shifting sands, shifting DUNS numbers. Okay. Good one. Okay, so from a Fed data check perspective now, we have been, for some time, I'll say we've been closing the barn door after vendors on the SAM exclusion list have left the barn. So So we manually track every day whether an award, a new award has been made against a debarred vendor, an option has been exercised, or the period of performance has been extended. So that's actually 4 things. New award, option exercise, the dates have been extended, or new money has been added to an award with a debarred vendor. If that happens, we spring into action. We'll manually run a report, and then we send it to our main POC. So for Interior right now, actually that's no longer Samantha Brownstein. Sadly, that's Chip DeMuzio. I think we probably have someone here from HHS. That would be Jennifer Strutt. So obviously the action is, something bad has happened. A new award has been made to a debarred vendor. Then we let our main POC know. It's better than not knowing at all, but the vendor has left the barn. We do have 2 reports in Fed Data Check that anybody who has login rights to our system, and all of you can get it. Just you can send it to me, Bob Harford at PotomacWave.com, and I'll run that by our main POC, and we'll get you access rights. Let's see. I know that I just happen to know one. Let's just go with what I was using. Let's log in to the agriculture Fed Data Check site. And take a look at these 2 reports that you or anyone else can manually run. So these are high-risk vendors on the SAM exclusion list, and you can manually see if something has happened after they were on that debarred list that shouldn't have. So here I am at the agriculture site. This is similar to any of your sites for your department. So I go to risk analysis, and I can look at higher risk active awards. And I'm going to say terminated by 3 or more departments. We have 2 different sections. And let's back that up 1 year, and we'll hit apply. And while that's running, we'll run the other report. I said there were 2. Here's the other one. Risk analysis awards to debarred vendors. And I'll explain what the difference is between these 2. Here you can pick those different exclusion types. So let's unselect prohibition restriction just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to look to see if agriculture has made any awards to a vendor on the SAM exclusion list since FY16. Okay, now this one has come back. We're calling this higher risk active awards. So I can see that agriculture has 26 active awards with vendors who are either on the ineligible proceedings completed list or the ineligible proceedings pending list. Now there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if these all, if you had an active award with a vendor, signed, you're already working on it, then they get put on the debarred list. You don't have to terminate that award. You can let that one finish its completion. You can't make a new award to them. Thanks. Marla answered one of those questions. I'll get to that right after this. So you can come down here too and you say, okay, Arrowhead Star Company, they got put on the debarred list on 2/23/2017. Proceedings completed. And you could go out and look at the full SAM report here. I'm not going to do that. So here are all the active awards with Arrowhead Star. Quite a few of them. And the key is you wouldn't want to see one that was awarded after 2/23. and I don't see one. So, this is a way, if you were on the, you can see, people can just come in and see who's, what vendors they have that are on the debarred list and have awards underway. So this one was signed on 6/1/2017, and they were, and then they were subsequent to that award, they were put on the debarred list with an exclusion type of proceedings completed. Okay, so that's one of our reports. Here's another one of our reports. Now here's one where we try to focus in and say, hey, this time this was a mistake, procurement error. So this is an award that went to GT Contracting. They were ineligible, proceedings pending. Makes no difference whether it's proceedings pending or proceedings completed again in terms of functionality. Yeah, they got put on there on 9/23/2017, and here's the active award 5 days later. So that one was a mistake. We have seen them where an award was made today, say January 18th. The vendor was put on the debarred list January 19th, and then the barring agency has 2 days to get it into SAM, and it came in on January 20th. So when they made that award and they checked SAM, they wouldn't have seen it. So it can, that's a pretty tight deadline there too. That's 5 days. Kind of makes me wonder whether that record was in SAM when this award was made. So everything we've talked about so far, we monitor this every day. You can go in and run manual reports. It's all looking at, okay, they were on debarred. Did somebody do something that they shouldn't have? Make a new award, exercise an option. Okay, what we've done now, though, the reason for this webinar is we do have an alert now that's closing the barn door before the vendors on the SAM exclusion list have left the barn. So the idea is vendors are coming on that debarred list and they're coming off that debarred list. If you look at that one right here, that one was indefinite, but they don't have to be indefinite. This one here. So Arrowhead, if I click on this SAM thing, we can go out and look at the full SAM record. Also known as Arrowhead Star Company. So they're on the debarred list on February 23rd, 2017. They're coming off 3 years later. So it's not indefinite. So they're going to come on, they're going to come off. What we do now on Fed Data Check is we're tracking when people go on that list. And when a vendor goes on that list, we will push out to the COs who have active awards with that vendor, just letting them know that a vendor that who they have a contract with that they're actively managing is now on the debarred list. Therefore, if it's a proceedings completed, initial proceedings or proceedings completed, don't exercise an option, don't add money, don't extend the period of performance, unless you want to start talking to the HCA. And we'll look at an actual example, but here's a mock example. And we provide all of the information in this email alert, and I'm going to show you one right after this. But Julie Rice has 3 active awards with Roadrunner Acme Inc. Roadrunner Acme Inc. goes on the exclusion list next week, January 24th, 2018. The next day, Julia Rice gets an email from us, from Fed Data Check, detailing the exclusion type, one of those 4 types they're involved with, and the corresponding 3 active awards for which she is the contracting officer. So here's an actual example. Okay. I want to look at one other. I think that's the one I need. Okay. So this alert, I went back in time to do it. This didn't happen recently, so this is an example that I had to go back in time to look. It would have gone to this this official at the Forest Service, and it's just saying it's for informational purposes only. No action is required, but we're letting them know that these awards here, of which he or she is the last updated by user in FPDS&G, there's the awards, are now associated with the debarred vendor. And when did they go on the debarred list? January 11th. And then there's the Arrowhead Star. How do you like that? The one we were just looking at. And there's the DUNS number. So it's giving a heads up to this CO saying, you know, you don't have to do anything, but we're just letting you know, Arrowhead Star, in case you didn't know already, Arrowhead Star on January 11th just got put on the debarred list, proceedings completed. That means you know, you can't extend the date, you can't exercise an option. I don't think you can put new money on it either. Does anyone have a comment on that? We will flag it. You know, you'll come up on our list if you add money to the contract too. You know, you can look at we have the exclusion types down here. Shall not solicit offers from, can't give a new contract, obviously. Place new orders, right here. Can't exercise an option. You can't extend the duration. Or consent to subcontract. So it doesn't actually say that you can't add money to the contract. It might be close to this, but maybe not. It would seem to me, does anyone have a comment? It seemed to me that if somebody's debarred, if you're administering a contract, managing a contract with Arrowhead and they got debarred, you can't, and you added $1 million to the contract, but you didn't extend the duration, and you know, you didn't exercise an option. It still seems like you shouldn't do that. That's my interpretation. Does anyone who have actual experience doing this have a comment on that? Okay. Hey, I did. So anyway, let's see if I got a poll here. Let me run this. So that was our big concept on this, and we're going to look through it on some other examples. But you know, don't wait till you exercise an option and then let you know, hey, you shouldn't have done that. Get something up. You know, people don't go. There are not that many on the debarred list. So if someone pops up on one, we're going to push out to you right away, so you can put that in your Post-it notes on the side of your desk or wherever you do it, just saying, okay, Arrowhead, well, that's one of the few who popped up. I'm going to be extra, and yeah, I presume you want to be extra careful. You know, when we say higher risk, if they defaulted in one, if they're debarred, I would think that would trigger some extra supervision on the part of the CEOs and program office as well. Let me launch this here. What do you think of that, this idea? If you were Roger Broher, whatever this person's name is, would you want to be, you know, as soon as Arrowhead popped up, would you want to be let know? that they are now on the debarred list. I'm getting mostly yeses there. I got a no. Okay. I got 80% yes, 17% no. I did get a comment here that before you award a mod, you are supposed to check the debarment list. So thank you, Marla. And Marla had another point. I don't have a direct answer, but this may be noticed during past performance review of evaluation. I suggest asking operative policy office as well. So that was on what happens when the vendor just shifts DUNS numbers. It just shifts hats. Okay. All right, I got mostly yes. I did get a no on that. If someone has said this would not be helpful, if you could maybe I can unmute you, raise your hand, and you could say why you thought this. Because that it would be good to get a different perspective. Okay. Well, pretty simple concept there. Here. All right, now here's high-risk vendor definition number 2, closing the barn door after vendors with multiple terms for cause default have left the barn. For many of our subscribers, and actually this recently came up, if you make a new award to a vendor who's been terminated for cause of default by 3 or more departments, we're going to send you an email in 2 days just letting you know that. So here's what that looks like here. No, that's not it. Here. I think this is it, yeah. Yeah. So here's an award that was made to CDW. I may have heard them on the radio. So after, if you're with one of the departments that want this alert, you sign an award with CDW on 110. This email alert went out on January 12th, 2 days later, just letting you know, hey, CDW has had issues with performance. And how many times have they been terminated for default or cause? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times. That's energy. That would be, I don't know who, Air Force. There's Army. And there's agriculture. So 4 different departments. We're just letting you know. It wasn't, you were not prohibited from making that award, but we would classify CDW based on our algorithm as a higher risk vendor on that 3 different department rule. That would be, again, that issue of the award's already happened, we're just letting you know. We don't have anything on that thing that's before. So we're not going to let you know, if a vendor goes from having terminated for default or cause by 2 different departments and then it happens again and they go to 3, we have nothing in place now that will proactively let the COs and CSs know that. I think that's one of my final poll. No, I don't have it. Does anyone, if someone thinks that would be helpful, you can raise your hand or make a comment. Right now, I don't want to get involved in too many alerts. On the other hand, I think that might be helpful. If a vendor goes from not having any terminations for causes or default, then they jump up to 8 over the course of a year or two, and I have active contracts with them, I would want to know that. Currently, we don't do that, though. We'll let you know after you make a new award to a vendor who's been terminated for default 3 or more times. But we don't let you know beforehand. Okay, that's it for high-risk vendors. 2 different categories. If they get debarred, we'll now let you know as soon as that happens. And we have plenty of checks to catch the bad stuff if it happens after the fact. And I'm shifting over to, let's call it topic number 2, vendors with a debt subject to offset, formerly known as a delinquent federal debt. Per this FAR citation, contracting officers have to look in SAM before using a P card as the method of payment if the amount is above the micro-purchase threshold. And I have a question mark. Is that it obviously doesn't happen every time because we see it with some regularity, those P card payments going out. And I have an editorial comment. Manually checking SAM every time a P card payment is used above the micro-purchase threshold while required is not an efficient method of fulfilling the FAR requirements. We think we have a better way. We'll see what you think. I do have a question. How does Fed Data Check get the information? And the answer is we download it from SAM every night. We actually download a file from SAM that has the exclusion lists, and it also has a flag in that exclusion. So every day, SAM updates a list with all the firms that are on the debarred list, their exclusion type or types. You can be prohibited as well as proceedings completed. You can have more than one exclusion type. We download that list and we update our records every day. And in that list, either in that list or another one, they have a flag in there as to whether that vendor also has a debt subject to offset. Okay, closing the barn door. We do have a check, so that if you do make a P card payment to a vendor with a debt subject to offset, we have a data check, and you'll get an email alert from us saying that you made a mistake on that one. At that point, the only course of action is to fill out a data check exception form. Say, look, I acknowledge my mistake. I didn't think they had one. I have them on the list. We won't use the P card again until that debt has been taken care of through the Treasury system. Again, then now there with this data check, something bad happened. A P card was used above the micro-purchase threshold with a vendor with a debt subject to offset. We then at Fed Data Check notify people of that mistake. So let's see, who do we, I know we have someone from Interior here. Do we have anybody from, other than Interior or HHS? Someone from, if someone could type in a comment what department they're with. Well, all right. I guess we'll look at it. I think I see some Interior people out there. Let's look at an Interior to see if there's been any payments to vendors with a debt subject to offset. Yeah, here, incidentally, on that email alert, when we implement this check, we start sending out the email alerts from when we implement the check. We don't go back in time. But we do, you can manually go back and check to see if, we implemented this check, I think, in the last 2 months. So it's anything from 2 months forward where that P card was inappropriately used. We'll generate the email alert and a data check error. We don't go back looking 4 years ago to see if it may have happened. We do have a manual report where you can do that. And we'll take a look at while that's running. These manual ones can take a little bit longer. Let's look at, see if any have happened at Interior recently. By recently, I mean, let's see if there are any that did generate an email. Yep, there's been 2. Okay. So here, the Heartland Motor Coach P card was used, 4,900, not much above the micro purchase threshold in December 27th. So you can go out and look at the contract action report. So that's above the micro purchase threshold, $3,500. P card is payment, yes. Let's go look at their record in SAM. Okay, and I can do view details. And then I look at core data. So view details, core data. And I scroll down here. Financial information, debt subject to offset, yes. So when we're tracking, when we download that file from SAM, incidentally, how do we get the information from SAM? Let me just dig into that. You might get that, yeah, I think it is. I'll have to look at where we get that file. Data access, exclusions list, exclusions interface. And this is the file right here. They do it by day. So if I click on that, that'll show you all of the vendors who are on the exclusion list, and there's a flag in there so we can see. That has the debt subject to offset. Okay, I'll verify. I'll send that out in an email. Verify that's where we get that, not only the exclusion types, but debt subject to offset. Okay, so we saw that for Heartland Motor, P card was used above the micro purchase threshold. We went over to SAM. We put in the DUNS number. We clicked on core data. We scrolled down here, and they are on the DSO list. After the fact, a check goes out after the P card payment was erroneously made. Now, how about, again, using that concept that we just saw on the barred vendor list and applying that to the debt subject to offset list. So the idea is you are the CEO with Arrowhead. You're managing 2 contracts with Arrowhead. When you made those awards, they were not on the barred vendor list. Sometime later they were. As soon as that happens, Fed Data Check sends you an email saying, hey, just for your information, no mistake, we're not saying anything wrong has been happened. We're just letting you know that there's extra things you have to do or not do when you're working with Arrowhead. Same thing with this debt subject to offset. Here's what we're doing. Just as with that debarred vendor email, informational purposes only, no action required. This email actually I think did go to G. Lopez, Agricultural Research Service, one of our subscribers, saying, here's the award, here's the vendor, and they are on the debt subject to offset list. Purpose of the Fed data check email alert is to inform you of an active award with the vendor as a debt subject to offset. And we also, there's a difference. See, this one has a yes, P card has been used. So I'll explain that. And you can look at another one here where no, P card has never been used. So on this award here, we're letting you know that Sanborn Map Company has a debt subject to offset. But those awards you're managing, you're administering for Sanborn, you've never have used a P card. So it's probably not an issue with you. You haven't used a P card with Sanborn anyway. But in this one, it's more significant because for G. Lopez, I don't know what her name is, Gloria. Gloria is managing those awards, and she has used the P card as payment with GV Technologies. So for these two, then you really do have to, make a note, say, okay, I used the P card with them before, but I can't do it anymore if it's above the NPT because they're on the DSO list. So we'll specify out whether one will let you know when they're on the list, and two will highlight if you need to pay special attention since a P card has already been used. So we already went through it, but a mock example. LaShawn Johnson has 2 active awards with Wild E. Acme. Wild E. Acme goes on the DSO list on 128. On 130, 2 days later, LaShawn gets an automated email from us designating those 2 active awards that she is the last CO record on in FPDS&G. Okay, in review. Any questions, by the way? Comments, questions? You can raise your hand and look forward. Okay. Okay. Vendors can go on and off the SAM exclusion list. Vendors can have multiple types of exclusion codes. I don't have a multiple. I've seen them before, but you can see proceedings completed and prohibition restriction, for example. So you could also be debarred by more than one agency. Being on the exclusion list does not mean you are necessarily ineligible to win new awards. We talked about that prohibition restriction, where commonly you violate a Clean Air or a Clean Water Act. You can be debarred only at that facility from receiving new awards. Action item, we're going to, we don't push out these email alerts unless the department agrees to it. If you think this is a good idea, you can run that up the chain. Interior, you can let Chip DeMuzio know. If you're at HHS, Jennifer Strutt, you can, I'm going to send you an email after this. You can reply to me and say, hey, I would like to get those emails. I think it's a good idea. Vendors with a debt subject to offset, can't give them a P card payment if it's above the MPT. Action item again, if you would like to get those alerts, just letting you know when someone pops up on that list and you have an active award with them, that would be something to let me know or let your Fed data check POC know. That's really it. I said I'd get back here. Bob Harford, VP Business Intelligence Products with Potomac Wave. We're a women-owned small business in Alexandria. Some NAICS codes we are a small business, some we're not. We do a lot more. We do a lot of different stuff with metrics, and we'd be interested in taking your ideas. We do a lot of stuff with grants. No one's really been that interested in that, though. But market research is something we're getting more involved with. We think that's an area that could use more rounding down in Fed data check. I mean, imagine you can go in and see all your active awards, click on a button, and you could generate an interested vendor list for people with past performance in that physical location and in those related NAICS codes. I would think that would be very helpful. But we're doing more all the time. We have some listed, a lot of metric areas there. I'd love to talk to you. Send me an email. Stay on afterwards so we can discuss it.